Hi, I'm Wells Hanley, and welcome to I Wrote This Song For You, a podcast where I share songs I wrote for people I know, or for people I don't know. The truth is, I'll write a song for anyone who evokes a feeling in me that I have no way of responding to other than to write a song for them. So let's meet today's guest and hear their song. Today, I'll be sharing a song I wrote for my friend Drexel, as well as an interview that we recorded in July of 2020, in the thick of the lockdown. Drexel is currently a chaplain at the UAB hospital in Birmingham, Alabama. He's also a songwriter, and he and I got to know each other years ago here in Virginia, where he was the minister of a Baptist church where my wife worked as a pianist. We don't identify as Baptists, but my wife would often come home from her Sunday gig talking about how much she liked his sermons, that he was insightful and open-minded. As Drexel and I got to know each other over the years, I came to appreciate our conversations, which were always heartfelt and often philosophical and really interesting and thought-provoking for me. In March of 2020, as the lockdown was just beginning, Drexel posted a video on YouTube, and in that video he told a personal story that helped me to put words and images around a feeling that I was having at that time as my performance schedule was drying up and I was finding my way into a slower-paced lifestyle. That video hit me in such a way that I felt immediately inspired to write a song. You can find a link to the full video in the show notes, but for now, we'll listen to an excerpt from the story, which is called A Coronavirus Gift. As the story begins, Drexel describes entering a crowded and noisy fundraising party at a brewery.
People yelled at each other. They had to yell at each other over the volume of the band and of the increasing noise of each other yelling because of the volume of the band. And some leaned in real close, ears right next to mouths. Some punched at their cell phones. Some stood in tight circles laughing. Some danced in front of the stage. But everyone had to do some kind of contortion to move through that human herd. It was incredible. You've been to parties like that anyway, I'm sure. Well, I saw a door open and it revealed the patio outside. Lights strung overhead in a crisscross pattern. And that opening drew me. It was attractive to me. And I stepped outside. When the door closed behind me, sound level dropped immediately. And I walked across to the railing at the edge of the patio. The sound dropped even further. The three-quarters moon backlit the edges of clouds moving along through the night on the breeze. I took a deep breath, let it out, realized I didn't want to go back into the party.
As I rest here into the silence, and the wind blows the trees.
I was in my kitchen when I saw your video, and immediately when the video finished, I went to the piano and started writing this song. There was just something about the story that so perfectly resonated with me in that moment, how I was feeling. And I would just love it if you could talk a little bit about what inspired you to want to tell this story.
What I've noticed, working here at UAB in the hospital, it's not any different than a lot of folks who do any form of ministry do. I know a lot of pastors feel this way, is that people are rushed. People are just worn out. The time, they don't have time. And so along comes coronavirus, and we're told that we have to social distance. And I was hearing some of my colleagues and some of the patients I had seen, some of the folks I work with out there in the community, and they didn't want to slow down. They wanted life to keep going normally. That's a major component of denial in that, of not wanting to do the tough work. Mm-hmm. So I was sitting there thinking, well, really, this is actually an opportunity for us. We can set up our lives differently. I've heard people all the time say, I wish I had more time, or I wish I had less to do. Well, here we're being given an opportunity to do less.
Yeah.
And actually being given the opportunity to sit back and be more reflective. And a lot of people say, well, I'm not a reflective person. Well, anybody can be reflective. Mm-hmm. And I think more reflection is probably what's called for right now. in society as a whole, because we've got a lot of knee-jerk anxiety out there.
Mm-hmm.
I've been at the bedside. I'm thinking of one particular young man. He was just 32 years old, and he'd still be with us. But the coronavirus gave him a pulmonary embolism. Mm. It aggravated it, and this 32-year-old guy died. And when I listened to his family talk, I took him over to the morgue so they could have closure with the body of this young man. And they were talking about how they wished that they had spent more time together, how they wished that they had slowed down. Mm-hmm. Wow, if we had just paid more attention to our lives and been more present.
Right.
We still live as if our jobs and the status and everything that we can refer to on a resume is what's important. Mm-hmm. That's not our essence.
I think that even in order to appreciate the people and the connections, it requires that you value those things. And I think that everyone does value those things in their heart of hearts, but there is this sort of collective flow toward doing more and acquiring more. And I think of it almost as a kind of a sleep has gripped people collectively. And it's so lulling, and it's such a slow drip that, often you don't realize you're in it until you're far in it.
Yeah, slow drip. Boy, that's a great analogy. It is indeed a slow drip. It's that old proverbial cliche about turning up the heat of the water on the frog.
I don't think I know that one.
Yeah, if you drop a frog into water that's already boiling, the frog will not stay. It will just immediately get out. If it's hot water, the frog will jump out, get out fast. But if you put the frog in cool water and slowly turn up the heat, you can boil the frog.
Oh, wow. That's a perfect metaphor for what we're talking about.
Yeah, I've never tried that.
Right.
But, and I never will.
As I find myself here in the garden, I can feel.
So oftentimes when a song comes to me, it comes with scenery, and it comes in a kind of a cinematic way or a theatrical way. Like I see something playing out on the stage, and the song is the accompanying soundtrack to that. And I realized much later, as I was working on this song, that after I heard your story, I had this visual of this guy in a suit, a kid about 14 years old, which is the age that I was when I started working a job on the weekends.
Yeah.
And I guess in a sense, the story is somewhat autobiographical. But anyway, so there's this 14-year-old guy, and he's in a business suit, and he's walking into this office environment. And he goes over to this desk in the cubicle, and he sits down, and he starts doing this repetitive motion. Like he's grabbing a piece of paper from one pile, putting it in front of him, stamping it, and then putting it in this other pile. And he just keeps doing this motion. And all around him is this noisy hum of machines like beeping and humming and stuff, and fluorescent lighting. It's just this really unlife-sustaining kind of environment. And we see him doing this motion, and then we see him aging, and we see him doing the same motion at 25, at 35, 45, 55. And finally, when he's like an old man, like in his 70s, the power goes out. And all of a sudden the room becomes quiet and the lights go out, and he's kind of stunned. And you can see the only light in the room is coming from this little crack underneath the door where the sunlight is coming through. And he just kind of gets up kind of like in a trance and makes his way over to the door, and he opens the door, and it's the outside, and the sunlight is streaming in, and he can feel the wind, and he's like, oh my God, like, what have I done? Like, what did I do with my life? What happened to me? And it's this kind of epiphany, one of what have I done, but also of like, how amazing that I get to experience this now. Like it wasn't too late.
Yeah. That's so fascinating what you're talking about right now. I teach with a group of people, something we call, you may have heard of the Enneagram. It's gotten to be very popular, but it's a body of wisdom that's very, very old. It predates Christianity. It has roots way back. It basically, what they talk about is at some point in our lives, as we're growing older, we're lucky if we have a shock point, something that grabs us and shakes us. It could be a divorce. It could be the death of a loved one. It could be losing a job. It could be the imposition of quarantine, because of COVID. Something like that. It's a shock point that pulls the rug out from under us. And at those points, we get the opportunity to rediscover what our essence is. And so, that guy who's sitting in the cubicle pounding the paper for all his years, something happens. The power goes out.
Right. Yeah, something happens to cause him to get up.
Yeah, and it's that shock point that gives us the opportunity to become reacquainted with the deepest part of ourselves.
Free from the lockstep of my bustling, and the thought that life was somehow, somewhere out.
Your writing isn't like country songs. A lot of country songs, they go for a verse, chorus, bridge, middle eight, and then a chorus. It's a formula. And yours is not formulaic like that. And almost like romantic, orchestral.
I mean, I was really going for that, the romantic kind of like, painting an atmosphere.
Right.
For me, so much of it was an atmosphere, but, formally speaking, it's really drawing from like early, like Great American Songbook and like early Broadway stuff.
Yeah.
And, so much of it, I think after the fact, I realized was modeled after When You Wish Upon a Star. The last A section sort of is an admonition. It's like, if you want to go to the garden, there's a rule to being in the garden.
Yeah.
And the rule is, which no one can enforce, it's up to you.
It's up to you.
And for some reason, when I sing that part, I'm thinking of Jiminy Cricket. I'm thinking of him saying, like, it's like your wish will come to you, but you actually have to wish it.
Yeah.
It's like, the song is saying that, like, when you wish upon a star, but it's not just like, if you want something, it'll come to you. It's like you have to put it out there.
That's fascinating, because that really plugs in, really resonates with a major theme in Perennial Wisdom. And I start with the Perennial Wisdom that's embedded in stories of Jesus and healing stories, And one of the things he does, several of them are like this, but the one that just leapt to mind when you said that about Jiminy Cricket saying, the wish is there, but you have to do something. You have to wish it. Right. Is in those stories, Jesus is never depicted as just simply coming in and the person being a passive receiver. The person is always a participant in what's going on, like the pool of Bethsaida. I'm thinking of that. And he goes up and he asks the guy, he says, "Do you want to be healed?" And the guy's sitting there and he says, "What do you mean, do I want to be healed?"
Right.
Isn't it obvious?
Right.
Jesus, well, why don't you do something here? Get into the water. You go and get in the water.
Interesting. I don't think that's in the forefront of your average reader of the Bible, that's a factor.
Yeah, I've always got in trouble at my churches, but because I would point out that well, for one thing, everybody that Jesus performed a miracle on in the gospel stories eventually died. Even Lazarus, who he raised from the dead, he died again.
So he was not a born again Christian; he was a dead again.
He was dead again.
Well, he was both.
Yeah. Well, see, that's the thing about it. None of those people were Christians either.
That's right. That's totally right.
And they didn't even become Christians.
I created this open space in the arrangement, and I wasn't sure how I wanted to approach it yet. So I just started laying down a placeholder piano solo, like knowing that I would come back and put in the real piano solo later. And I think because I knew it was just a throwaway, I was just much more risky, and I took much of a more far out approach than I normally would. And then over time, I just came to really like it, and I came to feel like it really expressed what the song was trying to get across. I was reaching for this sound that this composer named Messiaen uses a lot, where he has one scale or tonal center in the right hand and a different scale or tonal center in the left hand. And he would use this technique to try to create this feeling of these two worlds happening simultaneously. And for him, it was the transcendent world coming to meet or to happen alongside of the earthly world. And I mean, the song is definitely about peak experience, not peak experience through the extraordinary, but having a peak experience of the ordinary.
Yeah. This one thing that has been very meaningful for me in the midst of all this is I paid attention for the first time to some things that a very wise teacher said in another context. The teacher's name is James Finley, and he asked a group of us one time. He said, "Why do we think we are what is wrong with us? Why do we give more authority to what is wrong with us than the fact that we are filled with this beauty?" He just asked that question. And I had to think that so much of religion does that, so much of our secular culture even does that, points out what's wrong with us in order to sell us a product to make us better. And so we go around thinking that we're too skinny. I know when I was growing up, I thought I was too skinny. I wasn't macho enough. You know, a lot of particularly females in our culture have this very negative body image. Why do we think we are what is wrong with us? When we have, all of us, every single human being has something really beautiful in that essence. Mm-hmm. You know? That doesn't excuse me to keep on being a bastard, you know. Got to recognize that, but it's more like, you know, I've got a lot of good that I can express. There's creativity there. There's insight there. There's the capacity to love. There's capacity to embrace other people, to congratulate them, say that encouraging word, and that's part of me too. Mm-hmm. You know, that's the deeper self that I am.
We're all trying to better ourselves, right?
Right.
But I don't know that we better ourselves by highlighting either what's wrong with us or just what someone tells us is wrong with us, which might not even be wrong.
Right, right.
I feel like what we're talking about in all these different ways, what we're kind of circumambulating is this idea that we're being granted this kind of opening. Like whether we call it a peak experience, or we call it a new perspective, or like a shock point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever you call it, we have this opportunity to step outside of our habitual ways of seeing things and to reassess what's really important to us.
Yeah.
You know, my realization, which I'm hoping I can carry forward even after the lockdown is ended, has to do with finding stillness and quieting all of the voices out there that are telling me who or what I should be, and instead listening deeply inside of myself to try to discern what's naturally trying to emerge.
There you go. Yeah.
And in that quiet and centered place, I feel like I'm more open to experiencing things like joy and friendship and like being deeply moved by a piece of music or something.
Yeah.
I think those are the experiences that everyone's looking for. Uh-huh. And none of those experiences are consumer-based, and none of them have to do with reaching outside of ourselves to become anything other than what we are.
Right.
Your story was such a gift to me, Drexel. And in the moment that I heard it, It was exactly what I needed to hear. And in response, I wrote this song for you.
As I find myself here in the garden, I can feel the sun on my skin, and of every place I have ever gone before, here is where I've always been. As I rest here into the silence, and the wind blows the trees so easy, I feel myself letting go and getting free. Free from the lockstep of my bustling, and the thought that life was somehow, somewhere out there. As I still myself and listen and breathe in the air, there's a room for being in the garden. It's a simple one that no one can enforce. It's up to you. Step of my bustling, and the thought that life was somehow, somewhere out there. As I still myself and listen and breathe in the air, there's a room for being in the garden. It's a simple one that no one can enforce. It's up to you.
Wells, I really like the song. When you talked about the composer Messiaen, I hope I said his name right, I don't know how my French is, you were talking about the space that he inspired you to put in when you do the instrumental in the song, and that space where you have the right hand and the left hand doing parallel universes that still coexist. That got to one of the reasons why I have such a powerful, intuitive feeling of intimacy with the song. I tend to write in some almost formulaic categories having to do with American folk music and roots music, doing a writing project recently. I've been asked to write 9 different songs, and this particular one calls, I think, for some space, and that's what's been missing. My writing is going to change because of this song. I love it. This is a good example of when we do creative things for each other, how the cross-pollination brings on a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful fruit. So thank you so much, Wells.
You've been listening to I Wrote This Song For You. Today's song, In the Garden, was written and performed by me, Wells Hanley. To submit your story to be considered for a future song, simply fill out the form on the contact page of my website at iwrotethissongforyou.com. It's clear when a song rises up in me that it's meant to be given away as a gift. And sharing these conversations and songs with you is work that I believe in and am committed to continuing. But I need your help to keep it going. For as little as $5 a month, you can join the I Wrote This Song For You community on Patreon, where you'll have access to exclusive content and other rewards. Simply click the link Be a Patron, either in the show notes of this episode or on my website, iwrotethissongforyou.com. You'll be redirected to Patreon, which is a secure site where people like you who believe in projects like mine can lend your support. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.